After 13 years of running, Radovan Karadzic has now run into the hands of the UN War Crimes Tribunal, accused of genocide and war crimes. Has his capture stoked ultranationalism in Serbia? And what's his trial likely to reveal? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Imran Garda. Despite being one of the world's most wanted men, former Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic remains a national hero to many Serbs. Thousands turned out in Belgrade on Tuesday night to show their support for the war crime suspect. He's been in custody in the Serb capital since his capture last week. But as his extradition took place, those loyal to him poured onto the city streets to protest against the government decision to extradite him to the International Criminal Tribunal in The Hague. Joining us from The Hague is our correspondent Harry Smith, who's been following the recent developments. Harry, what's the atmosphere like at The Hague, given that Radovan Karadzic has finally arrived?
Well, it was an arrival that was greeted with some sense of relief, I'm sure, by those responsible for running the tribunal here. It's been a long time coming. We now know that Radovan Karadzic will appear here in court number 1 at 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. For the first time, he will see court number 1. It's a view he had better get used to. These trials do tend to take a long time. Of course, we don't yet know the dates for the trial. He will appear, first of all, it's a brief hearing. He will not be asked whether or not he is guilty or not guilty, and his lawyer has said he will not enter a plea at this stage. He has 30 days to do that. If he fails to enter a plea after 30 days, then the judges will enter one on his behalf, and that will be a plea of not guilty. Well, to tell me what happens from then on, I'm joined from the tribunal by Nerna Jelacic, who speaks for the tribunal. Tell me, how confident are you that this trial will go ahead, given the failure of previous trials? I'm thinking particularly of Milosevic.
I would say that we are very confident that the trial will go ahead. The defendant is in our custody and the tribunal is ready to do everything in its power to ensure that his well-being as well as right to expeditious trial are appreciated in accordance with the highest international standards. I would not say that we have had failures in previous trials. Out of 161 indictees of the tribunal, we only have 2 fugitives for 15 years of record. That is, I think, an impressive record.
The Milosevic trial, though, was dogged, wasn't it, by delays, and partly due to his ill health, partly due to the fact that he was defending himself. We're told that Radovan Karadzic will also defend himself. Is that going to make it possible for the prosecutors to keep the trial on track?
What I can say, and I speak on behalf of the tribunal, is that the tribunal's rights do safeguard the rights of every defendant to represent himself if it is in his interest. So it is the judges of this tribunal who will make the final decision. Once Radovan Karadzic expresses his wishes, he is today in the detention unit, as you know. He is meeting representatives of the registry who are explaining to him all the rights that he has regarding also legal aid and the help with conducting his own defense. And in the courtrooms at 4 o'clock, he is expected to also express his wish in terms of how he expects to conduct his trial. But even then, it is the judges who are going to make the final decision.
Now, as you say, you have experience of many trials, but this is really going to be an exceptional trial, isn't it? Will he be treated any differently from any other detainee?
He will not be treated differently. He is arriving in front of this tribunal, in front of its judges, with a presumption of innocence like one would before any other court in a democratic country. So the burden is, let's remember, on the prosecution to prove the counts that it charges him with. Yes, the counts are very serious. Yes, they include genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, etc. This makes the charges very, very, very serious. And of course, that takes time to prove those charges, but the tribunal will do its best and give all its powers possible to make sure that this trial is expeditious.
Nerna Jelacic, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and with that I now hand you back to the studio.
Harry Smith, thanks ever so much for that. Well, joining us as we broaden out this discussion today are our guests in Copenhagen, Payam Akhavan. He was the first legal advisor to the prosecutor of the tribunal. He's also a professor of international law at McGill University. In Belgrade, Vladimir Radomirovic, deputy editor of foreign affairs at the Serbian daily Politika. And in Sarajevo, Nidjara Ahmetasovic. She's a journalist and editor of Justice Report at the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Payam Akhavan, if I could start off with you. This has been called a landmark for international justice. Is it?
It is a landmark. If we go back to 1995, when we first indicted Radovan Karadzic, he was seemingly invincible. People thought we were utterly naive to think that he could ever face justice one day. He was an indispensable partner in the peace process. And many individuals, diplomats in the United Nations actually suggested that indicting him was a bad idea because it would be an impediment to the peace process. And I think that the indictment succeeded in removing Radovan Karadzic from the political stage, making him a fugitive. That itself was a great success for international criminal justice, both because it helped the post-conflict peace-building process in Bosnia by removing and marginalizing ethnic hate mongers and those who were the architects of ethnic cleansing. It sent a message for the first time in the history of the United Nations that you cannot commit genocide with impunity. But of course, the fact that he was still a fugitive and not arrested frustrated the international community and the tribunal. And I think that 13 years later, the fact that he's arrested sends the message to other would-be tyrants that you can run, but you can't hide. You may be in power today, but tomorrow you will fall from grace. And I think in that respect, it is a landmark because the Yugoslav Tribunal was the first experiment in international criminal justice since the World War II Nuremberg Tribunal. And the precedent that it sets is extremely important for the International Criminal Court and for the future of ending a culture of impunity that has prevailed for so long in the international community.
In Belgrade, Vladimir Radomirovic, is there a feeling amongst his supporters in Serbia? We've seen some tremendous support for him that he clearly didn't commit these crimes like genocide?
Of course, many Serbs believe that he did not commit crimes, especially genocide, since it was clear at the end of the Bosnian War that there was a clash between Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic, who was the chief officer of the Bosnian Serb army. And in fact, they clashed over Mladic's decision to attack Srebrenica because Karadzic thought that it would be much wiser to protect the western part of the Serb Republic against the forthcoming Bosniak and Croat invasion. But the thing is, the protests we've seen these days in Belgrade, and especially last night, the pictures are dramatic, but the protests have been less than expected. And it goes to say that that Serbs are rather tired of talking about what happened 15 years ago, and they just want to get over with this. And many Serbs, I must say this, accept that there were crimes committed on their behalf by people, especially in Bosnia, and they want to acknowledge this and move on and move towards the European Union.
Interesting story title in Britain's The Independent newspaper, Mr. Radomirovic. It says, Serbian press lionizes the cunning fugitive, not the criminal. Do you think that's accurate?
Yes, there were reports, many reports, and this also in the so-called serious press here about how Karadzic kept hiding from the authorities, and it is shocking and surprising to see him as a sort of a New Age guru who was openly expressing his views on alternative medicine in Belgrade and other cities in Serbia. And this was really shocking, and I mean, you know, it's obvious that the press would react strongly to this and continue talking about this. But I must also say that the journalists here presented what Karadzic is indicted of and what crimes were committed in Bosnia.
Payam Akhavan in Copenhagen, is there a feeling that Serbia has guaranteed its entry into the European Union with capturing Radovan Karadzic?
Well, certainly, with the capture of Radovan Karadzic, Serbia is one step closer to acceptance in the international community and the European Union. The fact that Ratko Mladic still remains at large, I think, is still an impediment, and I believe that this is why the European Union perhaps is still withholding the sort of recognition that the Serbian government wants. But what is very clear and significant here is that despite the fact that the ultranationalists have been making a lot of noise and there have been dramatic images which the media likes to focus on, the fact is that in the last elections, the Radical Party lost. It gained less than a third of the vote. And what we see in the streets of Belgrade is more a sort of desperate, futile, dying convulsion of those that do not want to let go of a very unfortunate past. The majority of people have voted for the pro-European parties in Serbia, and the fact that the government, despite the sort of political cost attached to the extradition of Karadzic, has handed him over, is a sign that the vast majority of people want to let go of the past and look forward to a future where they are part of Europe and part of the international community.
Nijara Ahmetasovic in Sarajevo, what does Karadzic's trial mean for Bosnian Muslims?
It means a lot. In the first place, it means it is a message that justice can be done. It is a message for all people in this country as well to all people in the world. I think that you cannot commit the crimes as genocide, as crimes against humanities, as all these kinds that are in his indictment and walk free around. It is a huge message and very important message, not only to Bosnia, but I believe to the whole international community.
Is there closure for Bosnians?
I cannot hear you.
Is there closure for Bosnians? Do they feel some sort of relief or closure after the horrors of the war? Yes, they feel kind of relief. But I mean, probably this feeling is much stronger after Karadzic, after we heard the news that Karadzic is now in The Hague, because we were kind of like not so secure while he was in Belgrade. But what took all this feeling from us are all these media reports about him having lover, about him being a doctor of alternative medicine, about him taping like porno videos and all that. I think it distracts the attention of all the people who are following these stories from what is really important. And what is really important is what did happen in Bosnia during the war, and that is what he is indicted for. All right, it's time for a short break. More on the trial of Radovan Karadzic on the other side of this. Do stay with us.